Today's recording will be in cinematic. This is Tom, and you're on Negotiating with Jesus. Negotiating with Jesus, you're here. This is the cinematic camera view. So today I preached because I get to do that, and I try as a faithful person, a person who's putting this kind of statement about Jesus into practice. You try to do stuff and often fail because, I don't know, if you read the Gospels, there's a bit of failure in the Gospels and in the Old Testament Hebrew scriptures. And there's a sense that they need some kind of king to change the whole lay of the land. And they can't for the life of them get it right. So today I talked about, it's Resurrection Sunday. So today we start at sunrise and we go out we started about 5 minutes before the sun rose, and it was already plenty light. The sun, it shines around the corner of the earth because the earth is actually square and you have to get up over that corner. Now the curvature of the earth, so the rays of and just beautiful sunrise, and sky is pink, there's some clouds, and the sun poked its little head out. And the idea that the English language is such that you say the sun is risen, and it's a wonderful thing that it corresponds with the idea that Jesus, the Son of God, is risen. So we used two of the resurrection scriptures. And I want to read through Mark. That's one of the goals that I'm going to do on this channel is read through Mark, and I would like to also read a couple books that are maybe less related. One is, I think I should read Flatland because it's in the public domain and I should just read it, and you can follow along the story and just throw ideas out. And also The Princess and the Goblin, or The Princess and the Goblins by George MacDonald. I just read that a second time. I did that for a book report for my daughter. I read it with her. And she wrote her book report and then stopped reading. And I'm like, well, I'm going to finish this book. And it was good. I like George MacDonald. I like that story in particular. But that has to do nothing with what I'm talking about now, which is what I preached were the resurrection scriptures from Mark. The end of Mark is chapter 16. Mark is very short and sweet. And the end of that particular passage, chapter 16, and it takes, an hour and 20 minutes to read the book of Mark. It's not very long. So in the morning, Jesus has been crucified. He's been killed on a cross, and his disciples they're pretty troubled by this turn of events. It's not good at all. And they all kind of scatter. And in the morning, Mary Magdalene, who is just a tremendous character in the Bible, this woman who she doesn't get a lot of airtime, but what she does is just, you can preach because it's just pretty cool. She's just a cool follower. And that's one of the things that Jesus kind of breaks our view of the idea of like a male-dominated world where, no, Mary Magdalene had a role in Jesus' ministry. She was a disciple of some sort. And Mary and Martha as well, as Lazarus, and then the disciples, Matthew, Mark, John, Peter. So Mary goes to the tomb, and she's there to anoint Jesus' body. She's got maybe some spices or some perfumes or something. It's kind of some kind of embalming, and it's this honoring burial ceremony. They have some kind of ceremony that it matters that somebody died, and Jesus, their Lord, this was the guy, and now he's dead. So she goes and she's thinking, they're talking and saying, who's going to roll this stone away? We have to anoint this body. We have to put some spices. We have to wrap it. The whole burial process happened too fast. They couldn't take care of it. It was right at the beginning of the Sabbath. They're not allowed to work, so now their work is before them. So they're going to anoint the body, and first they have to move this stone. That's a big job. They have a lot of work to do today. And they look, and the stone is rolled away, and they're like, what the what? So that work is already done. They go inside looking for Jesus, looking for a dead body. There's no body. They're like, well, our anointing, well, we can't do that work. The stone is rolled away. We don't have to do that. And there's an angel and says, if you're looking for Jesus, he's not here. He's alive. He rose. Just so now you guys go back, go tell Peter and the disciples that Jesus is alive and he's going to meet you in Galilee. He's going to go there ahead of you. Go and tell them. And then these three women just run, terrified and amazed. They just run. And the ending of Mark is, and they told no one. So they're told to tell somebody, and Mark just abruptly ends, and they've tagged an ending on it, and it's thought that that ending was an add-on some number of years later, that Mark just stopped with the women, the announcement of the angel, and they just run terrified and amazed and tell nobody anything. So then that was the morning service, and we talked just for a couple minutes. We sang a couple songs, we went inside and ate some food, and I cooked. And that's pretty iffy situation, because I cooked, and in my oven, my baking thingy thing, what is that thing called? The whatever that hot thing, I can't think what it's called right now. The element that does the baking, so that's the bottom element. Well, that hasn't worked in my oven. I have two ovens. I have a small oven on top and then a big oven below. Neither one of them, the baking mechanism, that element is not working. The one on the bottom. So when it says to bake a cake or do something like that, I have to broil. So I made this egg casserole and I had to broil it. And I'm pretty worried because I know that when I broil anything that's supposed to bake, it's 50-50 whether it comes out ruined. So I made this stuff. It's, I get up at 3:30 this morning. I have to broil breakfast because we have our morning service and then we have breakfast time. And it came out really good. And I, everybody ate a chunk, or a few people did. I don't know. We had maybe 15 people for breakfast. And then we went, so then we had to wait after breakfast till 9 a.m. We did our regular Sunday service. And it's Resurrection Sunday. So we read John 20, and it's the same story told by John, the apostle, the disciple, who Jesus gave a nickname. He gave three people nicknames, and it's Peter, who's called the Rock. He's like Dwayne the Rock Johnson. No. Simon the Rock, son of something something. So Simon gets that name, the Rock. And he names James and John sons of thunder. They have that great nickname. And if Jesus gives you a nickname, that's pretty darn cool. He never called me sons of thunder. Looks like my lips are out of sync. I don't know if this is going to work. The book written by the disciple Jesus loves, that's who the author is. And he's never identified, and everyone believes it's John. And I think that's fine. I'm not going to cause a big fuss thinking it's somebody else, but it's very interesting to me and fun that the author isn't named and that you can speculate. I like having opinions. Just ask anybody at my job. So I have opinions. So I read a little bit of commentary, and I'm going to do a message about the same story. This time, it's Mary Magdalene, of whom 7 demons were cast out. It's the same one that anointed Jesus with perfume. And Judas, the traitor, criticized her for wasting a valuable commodity, pouring it on Jesus' head, when they could have sold it and given the money to the poor, because Judas had a heart for the poor. So Judas betrays Jesus, and he dies on the cross, a brutal death. Mary goes again to the tomb to anoint him, and she finds the stone rolled away, and it's like, what the what? And she runs back and says, they've taken Jesus. She goes back to the disciples. They've taken Jesus. We don't know where they put him. So John writes that Mary went alone, but then Mary says, we don't know where he is. So there's a plural implying that Mary wasn't necessarily alone. And you get these strange mysteries of when the gospel stories tell the same story and there's some twist on it. So in this story, John then and Peter race to the tomb, and Mary Magdalene goes along. She probably is the slowest because it's a foot race. And Peter and John, they are running. They're young men. They're running hard, and John beats Peter to the tomb, and then Peter catches up, and he goes right inside. So it's like if the race was to the place where Jesus was laying, Peter's like, yes, you beat me too, but you didn't go in. You beat me, but. And then John says, he says twice, yeah, I beat you, Peter. So it's just a funny thing. And then I was reading a little bit of a commentary, and they note that it's interesting the way John and Peter have different kind of portraits, sketches of their life. And in the book of John, he's one of the favorites. So there were 3 disciples who were in the inner circle. It's John and James, the sons of thunder, and Peter, the rock. So the ones who get nicknames, they're like the favorites. They're with Jesus for all the big events. In the book of John, it's assumed that John is the author, and throughout the book, he's the one Jesus loves. He's the disciple Jesus loved. So he gets some kind of preeminent kind of description. He's loved. And throughout the book, Peter kind of stumbles through the stories. He keeps doing things that are a little odd or a little off. He boldly proclaims that he will not allow Jesus to die. Right after saying Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, then he says, but you ain't going to Jerusalem and dying. That ain't happening on my watch. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. To the rock, he says, get behind me, Satan. And it's like, that's got to be kind of a blow to Peter. And so John writes that in the story. But when John is mentioned, it's something very sweet. He's at the Last Supper, he's laying his head on Jesus' breast, and he's, taking comfort as, snugly with Jesus. And it's not gay or anything. It's just he's loved. He's a buddy. It's like when you see 2 boys and they got their arm around, boys walking down the path. They got their arms are over each other's shoulders. They're tight. Peter seems to stumble, and he is the one that disowned Jesus. He denied him 3 times. Peter says, I will never fail you, Jesus. Whatever happens, I'm going to die with you. And then he goes and witnesses Jesus' trial. And when people question him, hey, are you with Jesus? He just said, Jesus, I'm with you to the end. And then a young woman says, are you with Jesus? And he's like, no, I don't know this Jesus to which you refer. He denies him 3 times. Jesus predicted it. He said, before the cock crows, you'll deny me 3 times. So on his 3rd denial, I don't know that guy. I don't know what you're talking about. And then a rooster crows. And Peter again just feels like, I have failed. And it's just bittersweet. Peter is such a wonderful character in this story. And he is heartbroken that he's failed Jesus, and Jesus goes on to be crucified. So now John beats him to the tomb. Peter darts right in, and they see the grave clothes, these cloths that would wrap a body. They're just sitting there, the head covering and the body covering sitting there empty. And John, it says in the book of John, John believes. And then in parentheses, they didn't have parentheses, but this is the author, the translator's attempt to interpret Greek writing. They didn't understand yet what had happened, but John believed. And then they walk away. Peter and John walk away. Mary, in the meantime, came to the tomb, and she's standing there, and she ducks in, and there's an angel. And the angel says, "Hey, Jesus is alive." She go, no, is that right? Is that how it worked out? Now I got to think how the story goes. But she goes out. An angel tells her Jesus is alive, and she goes out into the garden. She's not confused as to what's happening, and she sees Jesus but doesn't recognize him. She thinks he's a gardener. This tomb is in a garden. She thinks he's out cutting the grass, taking care of the tombs in the garden. She says, "Hey, do you know where they've taken Jesus? Just tell me. I'll take care of it. Just tell me. I want to take care of his body." And Jesus says, he had asked her, "Who are you looking for?" "I'm looking for Jesus. Do you know where he is?" And Jesus says, "Mary." And then suddenly she realizes that's Jesus. And she says, "Rabboni," which means teacher, but the actual Greek means more. It's like this beloved, honored teacher. This is her beloved teacher who she would lay down and cry and wipe his feet with her hair, wash his feet with her tears. "Rabboni." And then Jesus says, "Don't cling to me right now. You go back. Instead of clinging to me, go run and tell the disciples that I'm going to ascend to their Father. I'm going to ascend to my Father and their Father," or some such thing like this. I'm telling it by memory, so I could have details off. So she runs back, and then the whole witnessing that Jesus is alive happens, and many, many witness. And chapter 21 will have a lot of witness testimony that John's writing, how they interacted with Jesus. But Mary, again, the first at the tomb, and then the first, "Go tell them I'm alive." And Mary goes and tells the disciples he's alive. And there's some pushback against Mary. She's a woman. But Jesus himself thinks, "You're suited for the job, Mary. You're going to be the one who's going to go out and tell the disciples, the men who are clearly confused, but all of you need to realize that I'm alive." So Mary, it was a great story of Mary Magdalene, and I'll talk about those stories once in a while, but I'll talk about the meaning crisis, this little corner of the Gospels, and I'll try and do some reading. And I'll tell you that I preach, and if I stumble, it's like, yeah, well, I want you to feel like this is something that you could do. You hear all these fancy preachers, and you're sitting in your pew thinking, I could never do that. And you hear these great musicians, and you're like, I could never do that. I'm going to be the bumbling guy that you will always look at and say, I can do that. Yes, you can. So that's it for now. Negotiating with Jesus. Tom out.